things about space.
And unfortunately, that won't help you here.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Baggage Claim, an unofficial Jetlag the Game companion podcast. We're here to unpack Season 13, Schengen Showdown, Episode 3. I'm Kira.
I'm Jaya.
And I'm Casey.
Jaya, name a woman.
You, Kira.
Nice. Casey, name two more.
Liz Cheney and Jodie Foster.
Two absolute bangers.
Insane polls.
They were the first to come to mind.
Casey and I have been talking about this challenge for days, and every time I ask Casey to name a woman, she says Liz Cheney.
I don't know why she lives so top of my mind.
Let's get into the recap. This was a chunky one. Dare I say, the chunkiest episode so far. We start in the immediate aftermath of the Austria Ode to Joy challenge, taking Team Badham definitively into the lead and sending Sam and Tom scrambling to the east to try to rack up some more countries. Ben and Adam briefly stop in Switzerland to open the Deja Vu challenge, which they decide to hang on to for the time being. Instead, they first spend a teeny tiny amount of time in the teeny tiny micronation of Liechtenstein and manage not to go hungry despite Liechtenstein's lack of wheat export. Speaking of Hungary, Sam and Tom head straight into Hungary and lock the country by doing 96 things. Or, more accurately, by Sam absolutely bodying 80 rapid-fire burpees, which I do not understand. During the whole challenge, Sam accidentally does 2 burpees for the price of 1, or maybe 1.5 burpees for the price of 1. The point is, his burpee was too big, and my body feels like a noodle watching him. How is he still alive?
That man is insane.
Just crazy. Soon afterwards, Sam and Tom make their way into the Czech Republic, and Sam balances out his brawn with his brains by revealing that he can't spell Czechia. They lock CZECHIA, thanks to Tom's metronomic walking, and no thanks to Sam's inability to name women. After watching the episode, Casey and I decided to name 100 women, and while we didn't have the stress of also keeping time or being 2 days into a 6-day trek across an entire continent, we were also extremely not locked in and still crushed it in 8.5 minutes.
It's just not that hard.
It's just not that hard.
If you know 100 women, it's not that hard.
On the other side of things, while Adam and Ben journey back into Switzerland to reenact a scene from Hide and Seek, Ben loses his phone and then magically gets it back like the lucky duck he is. We also get the closest we've ever seen to a real-life, on-camera fight in which Ben can't seem to lock in and memorize his lines despite Adam's death glares. Miraculously, they do manage to succeed on the challenge in what I can only imagine was an audition for Wes Anderson's newest film. Both teams end up with pretty strong schemes to go either down south to Italy or perhaps north to Copenhagen. The score at the end of this episode, 5-2, with Ben and Adam still hanging on to the lead. To conclude our recap, I've come up with a title to highlight the most important moment of the episode. Timer, I hardly know her. What do you both think?
That's fantastic.
That's awesome. That is so good. That definitely beats my pitch. I was just gonna go for $1 name a woman, but Timer, I hardly know her, is really good.
And with that, I'll pass it over to Casey for the Strat Chat.
Welcome back to the Strat Chat, our segment where we break down the strategy and gameplay of the episode. In this episode, we see most of Game Day 3, where both teams have progressed out of their opening moves and settled into the middle game. Over the season so far, we have seen the importance of locking countries so they cannot be stolen, which would give a net 2-point increase for the stealing team. In this Strat Chat, I want to once again discuss the strategic choice of when to lock a country in the context of geography. So we see Ben and Adam prioritize locking Switzerland because they think the other team won't try to steal Liechtenstein if Switzerland isn't stealable. And similarly, Tom and Sam are dedicated to locking Hungary and Czechia because they are next to each other. It seems like both teams think leaving neighboring countries unlocked leaves them uniquely vulnerable to a steal. But the solution isn't necessarily to attempt the challenge and lock every single country. Tom even says it. One country is not tempting. So, Kira and Jaya, what do you think? Does locking a country protect its unlocked neighbor?
I think it would depend on what the other neighbors are and also how easy it is to get to, because Liechtenstein's very, very small. So locking the two countries next to it really does protect Liechtenstein.
And I think we've already talked about traveling through a country that either your team has already claimed or that the other team has locked being a detriment to this kind of strategy where you're wasting a lot of time going through a country that you can't really do anything with. And so I think here, one of the elements of this strategy is, okay, if this larger country that you have to travel to in order to get to this other region, if that larger country is claimed and you can't steal it, then is it that worth it to travel through for potentially hours and hours just to try to steal a smaller country that's less accessible? But I also think here, Tom and Sam are talking about this like stretch of several neighboring countries in a row. They're trying to claim these neighboring countries because they know if they leave one of them open, it might be easier to kind of go through and hit several at the same time. But I'm wondering specifically, do you think only locking Hungary and leaving Czechia unlocked, do you think that's enticing for Ben and Adam to go steal Czechia? Or is it only those countries that are smaller, less accessible, like Liechtenstein, like some of the microstates who are kind of enclosed within another country?
I think that it is a different situation, the Hungary situation and the Liechtenstein situation. And I disagree with Tom when he says that one country is not tempting. I actually think that with the region that they're in, the Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia region, I think that even leaving one country unlocked is still really tempting just because they're all pretty accessible from a pretty big airport. So they're all just a train ride or maybe 2 train rides away from Vienna. And so I think that especially as we get later into the game when most of the easy countries are going to be claimed, if not also locked, it's going to be more appealing for a team to try to steal from the other team than to go to a new country. And so I think that as we get into days 5 and 6, I predict that we're going to see, like, Team Badam would be more likely to try to steal a country like Hungary if it hadn't already been locked, rather than trying to go to a new unclaimed country because they're going to try to get the 2-point swing. And so I think that it's more significant to lock the countries that are easy to get to rather than thinking about, oh, well, all of its neighboring countries are locked and so we don't need to lock this one.
I also wonder if that is related to the mode of transportation where we're seeing you are traveling by train through Switzerland to get to Liechtenstein. You wouldn't take a flight to access Liechtenstein. So in the later days of the game, the other team is probably not going to fly just to pick that up versus maybe some of these larger, more accessible countries that even if it's the only unlocked country, you could get a flight on day 5 or 6. And that is still vulnerable to a steal. I think that throughout the season so far, we've seen the strategies kind of change from both teams about when do you go for the challenge and try to lock a country. But I think this was really the first time where we were seeing the relation of multiple countries near each other playing a role in that decision making. And I'm really curious to see how that ends up later in the season.
Yeah, like I think locking Liechtenstein was less important because they had the countries that are the only route to Liechtenstein. You can't get directly there.
Team Badam isn't leaving a lot of countries unlocked. And so I wonder if later in the season...
There's not going to be much to steal.
Right, there's not going to be much to steal, which maybe will end up being a good thing for Team Badam because they're leaving only inconvenient countries for the steal, which is their whole strategy.
We didn't see the challenge for Liechtenstein either. They weren't able to open it because they had the Switzerland challenge open.
Right. And so strategically, I do think that they did the right thing by opening the Swiss challenge first and then going into Liechtenstein and not... Like, I think that they played it well.
I think it is stealable, but it's not the most appealing country to steal.
Yeah, I think it will be really interesting to see whether this strategy of selective locking is successful, but much more to come in the rest of the season. For now, I will pass things back to you, Kira.
Thanks, Casey. Let's move into a segment we're calling Challengers. where we explore alternate ideas for how to complete a certain challenge. So I want to talk about specifically the waste time, tell time challenge. There were lots of different possibilities for how this challenge could have played out. And so I would love for us to talk a little bit about perhaps some other options that may have gone faster or may have been easier. And so I'll get us started by reminding us about the rules of the challenge. On the card, there were some options on how Sam and Tom could waste time. They needed to complete 3 of the 5 activities and then correctly identify what time it was within 5 minutes. The options on the card were get an item completely wet and watch it completely dry, unpack and repack every item in your bags 10 times each, name 100 different real women, do 200 jumping jacks each, and play 10 successful rounds of 20 questions. So with these parameters, what do you think you both would have done?
I think they did perfectly on the get item wet and watch it dry. A chapstick dunked in a water bottle, beautiful. That's the easiest way to do it.
I agree. I was kind of intrigued that they didn't go for the unpack and repack every item in your bag 10 times each. I feel like that would not have been that time consuming. They're traveling pretty light. They only have their backpacks. And it might be a little bit annoying. I don't know how tightly they're packing those bags. But I feel like 10 times each is not terrible there.
Yeah, I think it would completely depend on how tightly they've packed their bags, and also, like, are things in their bags in little pockets, and do they need to put them back in little pockets? And, like,
I see.
Does Sam have packing cubes or something like that? If they have it, like, meticulously organized, then that might take a minute.
That's true. I guess I was thinking the physical activities are probably going to take a shorter amount of time because you're able to just kind of, like, brute force do that versus... Yeah. Naming 100 different real women, I do think that they did not put their best showing forward in that moment. It was pretty rough to watch. The fact that, so Kira and I did do this by ourselves. We each named 50 real women. We named 100 women in the amount of time that Sam took to name 25. That is, like, pretty brutal to witness. And
that is so embarrassing.
I completely understand. Your brain does go blank, but...
Yeah.
Taking 4 times as long as Kira and I when we were just kind of like, whatever, not locked in doing it, wild. And obviously the fact that they thought they had to do 200 women was hysterical.
That really, that they were at 88. They were so close. That is so funny.
Yeah, but so I do think that one is very doable. I think that doing 200 jumping jacks each, pretty easy. You're able to even kind of do that in rhythm as you're trying to tell the time. I was so surprised when they decided to go for the 20 questions rounds. Same. I had no faith, and I know Sam kept just saying, like, trust me.
But Sam had such a good strategy. He was right.
Look, I'm a diehard Team Sam fan. I did not trust him, and then he came through with what I thought was such a brilliant stroke of strategic genius. I thought that went as well as he possibly could have imagined.
Yeah, he bodied that.
But I certainly would not have thought of that in the moment. So I feel like I would have done the watching an item dry. I would have probably done the jumping jacks. And then I feel like it was kind of a crapshoot between unpacking and repacking and naming real women, depending on what you chose to do to keep track of time and whether you wanted to, like, alternate team members participating in those things.
Yeah, on the topic of Sam's incredible stroke of genius to start with a low card and just keep going, I do think the absolute funniest thing that happened in that was him saying, not usually, in response to, is it edible, due to he had to eat a card in the last season.
It's so
and
funny.
That is so funny to me.
As soon as he said that, though, I was like, oh my god, it's a card. I know it's a card. Like, I knew based on that answer that it was a card.
You're so smart. I did not get it. I was not even close.
How do you both think that you would have told time?
That's a good question.
I mean, I feel like we've seen twice the success of keeping time based on a pace, which is extremely impressive. I don't have faith that I would be able to keep a pace. I think that's the only way
I could do it.
I just don't think I walk consistently like that.
I could if I was trying, but I would have to try to do it, and to do it for 35 minutes, I would get so bored.
I know, and then I would absolutely lose count. I wonder if there was a way to do, like, a sundial.
I was wondering, maybe this is my STEM brain talking, but I almost wondered if they could build sort of like a makeshift hourglass type situation where, like, if you put a water bottle tilted at an angle and let all the water run out of it into something else, and you could time how long that takes, or, I don't know, some kind of hourglass situation. Maybe that would have wasted more time than it would have saved, but it would have saved a lot of stress.
I love the idea of, like, water bottle hourglass.
Yeah.
I bet you could poke a hole in the lid of a plastic water bottle and it's going to be, like, falling out of the water bottle at a consistent rate, depending on how large that hole is. And you could probably maneuver it to make it fall out every, like, 1 to 5 minutes.
Or even just measure how long it would take and then count how many times it happened. Yeah, I do think that I have less...
You're so smart.
I have less faith in my own physical capability to, like, tell time based on a consistent physical action, and I have more trust in, like, my ability to construct something that is fairly reliable.
Yeah.
And that you wouldn't need to pay as close attention, so you could probably go faster for naming women or 20 questions because you wouldn't be so concerned with, like, keeping track in your head.
Yeah, you wouldn't be counting the whole time, so both people could be doing activities.
I will say, seeing this challenge for the first time, I was like, oh, this is easy. They just have to do their 3 activities within 5 minutes, like, as fast as possible, so that they kind of encompass with the wiggle room on either end. And then, clearly, that was not possible.
That's smart, though.
Like, I felt like if you do it as fast as possible, and then you guess, okay, it's only been a few minutes, like, the longer it goes on, the more that 5-minute wiggle room is less helpful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. That's a good idea.
With that, I'll pass it over to Jaya.
Thank you, Kira. It is time for another train of lies. In this episode, Ben said a lot of stuff. Apparently, there were some running bits that got cut like 90% of the time, but to me, it just sounded like Ben had facts for days. So in this train of lies, I will be presenting you with a bit more context for some of Ben's facts in an attempt to bamboozle you.
I'm already so nervous.
Me too.
Prince Hans Adam of Liechtenstein became interested in UFOs following a sighting by one of his aunts near Munich in the 50s. He subscribes to the abductionist view of extraterrestrial life, apparently. That, like, it seems like we were visited by a species and they are trying to either take us or, like, integrate or do something weird with things on Earth. And so my question for you is, which of these 3 UFO research-related phenomena did he actually fund?
Oh my god,
this is
I'm
a
so
great
excited
question.
about this.
As soon as Ben said something about UFOs, I knew I had to do something with this because, dear listeners, I am an astronomer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I'm a UFO connoisseur, so...
And I've proven myself to be really good at this game.
Casey, you took cosmology with
I
me.
did.
You know things
I
about
know
space.
things about space.
And unfortunately, that won't help you here. The 1992 abduction conference held in Boston at MIT, according to the unauthorized biography of Commander Cecil Beam Scott Jones in 2002.
Beam Scott.
The concluding talk at this conference was given by a guy named John E. Mack, who seemed to, like, give a pretty interesting lecture about epistemology and cultural knowledge and why UFOs can be uncomfortable or hard to think about. It seemed like a little bit of an Orientalist conference with a bunch of white people talking about spirituality and culture, but also pretty interesting. Second, a planetarium dome at the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, New Mexico. But instead of being a projector, it's about halfway between an IMAX and a planetarium. And so the first film that they showed here was a reconstructed documentary about the 1947 Roswell incident. Third, the Archives for the Unexplained, formerly known as the Archives for UFO Research in Sweden, a depository for materials about UFOs, UFOlogy, cryptozoology, paranormal phenomena, and folklore. The collections of this archives take up approximately 3.5 kilometers of shelf space with tens of thousands of materials.
Kira, do you have any initial reactions?
So my gut reaction is that I think it would make the most sense if it was something that was in Europe, just because I don't know a lot about Liechtenstein's relations with the US. And so that's sort of a point in favor of the third option. But then also, I think that the prince is pretty focused on UFOs specifically. And so maybe it's not that likely that it's the one in Sweden, because that had, you were saying, like cryptozoology and other stuff. And so maybe now I'm thinking it's not the third option. I really want it to be the one in New Mexico because I personally love Roswell. I think it's so cool and funky. But I think it's maybe not that one. I'm leaning towards the conference because I feel like the prince is sort of a high up political figure, and so would want something that seemed really official and sophisticated and academic. But I would love to hear Casey's thoughts so that she can sway me into the correct answer.
I loved listening to you convince yourself in and out of all of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
I feel like Roswell, to me, does not feel like he would fund this. That feels like there's a lot of local infrastructure. And although Roswell is obviously a very well-known site for, like, UFO activity, it does not seem like something that he would need to invest in. Likewise, the conference, first of all, the fact that it's in Boston is hilarious. I'm gonna go with the archives, because to me it feels like something that he would contribute partial funding for, but it's an existing project that doesn't necessarily depend on his investment.
Okay, I'm going to go with Boston. I don't think that he's going to be funding something that's also looking into cryptozoology and general mythology, stuff like that.
Kira, you win!
Ah!
Whoa.
It was the conference in Boston.
It's a new era for Kira.
It's so over.
Casey, the archives are real and do exist, but he didn't have anything to do with them, it seemed like.
I want to visit those archives.
Right?
sounds
It sounds
awesome.
cool as
Sounds
hell.
so cool.
And the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, New Mexico does exist. Completely made up the planetarium dome because I'm going to a planetarium training tomorrow.
I thought that sounded really cool.
It did sound really cool. That's one that I would have wanted to go to the most.
Yeah, me too.
It does seem like a really cool museum there. The second cable car on the train of lies. Ben Doyle got really into wheat farming while in Europe. And it seems that this was a running bit that he was saying for every country they went to, but they only kept it in for Austria and Liechtenstein, which I thought was extremely funny. I therefore present you with 3 facts about European wheat. The Svalbard seed vault contains a few 100,000 samples of wheat, a few of which are actually grown in a bit of water, pretty similar to a rice field, and this could make them a strong contender for Scotland, should the Scottish barley fields ever have some catastrophe. Second, so briefings on the world agricultural production from the USDA, known as WAP, no, I am not kidding, most recently stated that wheat harvests in the EU this year are 10% below the last 5-year average. Much of this just seems to be because of sporadic drought conditions, but other parts of it are completely unexplained, and it might just be that their exports and harvest are different. Third, Americans in Europe love saying stuff like, "Ooh, I can only eat European bread. Their wheat is so much better for me." And while this may be true for people who are, for example, sensitive to the mineral selenium, which shows up in American soil, I think 10 times higher concentrations than it does in European soils, it has absolutely nothing to do with gluten, because European wheats actually tend to have more gluten than American ones.
Okay, so which one of these is true?
That last one feels untrue to me.
I do feel like I have heard Americans say there is something different about European bread production that makes it easier to digest or something. But I also feel like that could just be someone pretending, you know, like
Right.
that could be any number of things. That could be because they're walking more, you know, that could be because they're on vacation.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued by this first one. The seed vault. I love the idea of this. And I know that the seed vault is real. I can't remember where it is. That sounds correct to me. This is really hard. I kind of don't have a leading theory. The second one depresses me if it's just unexplained why crops are down. Okay, I'm going to guess that the first one, the seed vault, is real.
I'm going to lock in on seed vault.
I've bamboozled you!
No!
It was the depressing one from the WAP. The seed vault does contain a few 100,000 samples of wheat, and it's a completely unrelated fact that Scotland does grow more barley than wheat because it is too wet for wheat there. And the third one, yeah, the European wheats are soft wheat, which do actually have less gluten and protein than the ones that are primarily grown in the US.
Good to know.
So while pretending to read a newspaper on the train to Liechtenstein, Ben goes, Adam, did you know that Wagen von Coop und Migros stellen dir eine Zusatzfrage? And this seems to roughly translate to something like, the shopping carts from Coop and Migros have an additional question to ask you.
What?
Which of these 3 facts about grocery carts is actually true? First, the modern-day shopping cart was invented by a grocer from Oklahoma City in the 30s at the grocery chain called Humpty Dumpty. Shoppers were really hesitant to embrace the switch from a grocery basket into these wheeled carts reminiscent of baby carriages, so this guy who invented them hired a bunch of models to pretend to shop with them. Second, one of Humpty Dumpty's main competitors was a grocery store named Piggly Wiggly. When Piggly Wiggly tried to bring their shopping carts to Europe, they were a colossal failure because they had failed to consider that Europeans, who walk to and from the store much more often than their American counterparts, had already figured out that attaching wheels to their grocery baskets was a good idea. Finally, maybe Coop and Migros, the grocery stores from Ben's original quote, aren't actually grocery stores at all, and this whole quote was about the streetcar type of trolleys, and I bamboozled you into listening to facts about grocery stores.
Oh, Jaya.
What's
This
true?
is an evil question.
This is an evil question.
Would you bamboozle us about the whole
I think it's the first
category? I also think it's the first one because that whole Oklahoma City vibe, every part of that, I was like, this would happen in Oklahoma.
Humpty Dumpty, that's 100% where it happened. I would believe no other story.
Hiring models to pretend to shop, that feels so American. I'm locking it in. I think
too.
that's true.
You guys bodied it. That was the true
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Yes!
It was some guy in Oklahoma City at the grocery chain called Humpty Dumpty, and you nailed it.
So what additional question is a shopping cart asking?
Great question. I have no idea.
I'm guessing it's like, what's
does
in
that
your
mean?
shopping cart?
Shopping carts aren't usually asking questions to
But
me.
they have
I don't know how
another.
you
What are
guys
the baseline
shopping.
questions, and then there are additional questions on top of that?
Yeah, exactly.
What?
The shopping carts are already asking
This
questions.
is haunting.
The shopping carts are really polite, and they're like, hello, how's your day going? And then they're like, additionally, did you remember to get milk?
Well, our winner for the train of lies is Kira.
Woohoo!
Good job. You didn't get anything right in the last one, and you've really redeemed yourself
I
here.
feel redeemed. This is a we're so back moment.
It's so over for Team Casey.
And with that, I will pull this train of lies into the station and hand it back to Kira.
Thanks, Jaya. We're going to head into conclusions with our good old Rosebud Thorn. Casey, do you want to get us started?
Sure. My rose for this episode is it is so back for Team Sam and Tom. They absolutely slayed their challenges. Even their failure to name 100 women was hilarious. I was feeling pretty down in the dumps about their episode 2, and I feel like they really pulled it back in this episode, which I love to see. My thorn was that although I understand Ben and Adam were brute force memorizing their previous jet lag scene, their performance was hilariously monotonous. And I really just wanted to see Adam's theater kid shine through. I felt like they really could have done a beautiful portrayal and performance there. But my bud is that I am really hoping Ben and Adam conk it up in Vatican City next episode.
Jaya, how about you?
My rose is that Tom being so competitive and so insane that it makes Sam seem like the chiller member of a team is such a fun switch in dynamics from previous seasons. I think that is a blast to watch. My thorn was that they truly sent me through heart palpitations when they thought it was 200 women. And I was like, how are they going to do any of these other options? These are impossible. But it worked out in the end. And my bud is that if they go anywhere Scandinavian in the next episode, I have a really funny concept for a game that I stole from pub trivia. So I hope that happens.
I also hope that happens for our sake. My rose is that I thought this episode had the best challenges so far. I thought they were really fun to watch, and also they looked really fun to do. I'm sure they were really stressful in the moment, but in a less stressful environment, I think that the Waste Time Tell Time challenge genuinely could have been really fun. My thorn is that I'm so bummed that we never got to see what the Liechtenstein challenge was, and I'm nervous that we're never going to see what it was. And my bud is that I'm excited to see maybe some new strategies starting to develop in these next couple of episodes now that a lot of the country hubs have been claimed. And so we might start seeing some singleton countries getting scooped, getting claimed. I think could be very exciting. And with that, thank you for waiting a baggage claim. Let us know your thoughts on socials at baggageclaimpod or over email in the episode description. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a comment or give us a follow. We'll see you next week at the baggage claim Lost and Found. It's right next to all the other baggage claims, but it's full of all the bags that accidentally got sent to the wrong destinations. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Emma Thompson, Emma Watson, Emma Stone. Shut your little mouth.
You're doing great.